I was cheated out of a seat at my wife's family dinner, so I exposed their lies and took everything. I walked up the familiar steps of the house that was supposed to be my home, my shoes tapping against the worn wooden boards of the porch. It was a grand Victorian mansion, 80 years old, standing tall in an upscale neighborhood, where every lawn was perfectly trimmed and every car in the driveway gleamed under the sun. This place had belonged to my wife's family for generations, passed down like some precious heirloom. When Camila and I got married, I thought it was ours, a place where we'd build a life together, raise kids, maybe grow old surrounded by those creaky floors and high ceilings. I was wrong about that, and it hit me harder every day. Camila loved this house more than anything. She grew up here, running through the halls as a kid, picking roses from the garden her father planted before he passed away. She'd tell me stories about those roses, how her dad would spend hours tending to them, how each bloom was a memory she held on to. To her, this house wasn't just a building, it was her family legacy, and she saw herself as its keeper. I used to think that included me, but lately, I wasn't so sure. 6 months ago, everything changed. Her mother, Helen, and her sister, Clarissa, moved in after Helen sold her own place, and Clarissa lost her apartment to some bad money decisions. I didn't fight it. Family's family, right? But ever since they showed up, I'd been feeling less like a husband and more like a tenant, someone who paid the bills but didn't belong. I'm a financial consultant, pulling in a good salary, enough to keep the lights on and the fridge stocked in this big old house. It's not like I'm struggling. I work long hours, crunch numbers, help people plan their futures, but when I come home, it's like I'm stepping into someone else's world. Helen's got her sharp tongue, always reminding me I didn't grow up with their kind of history. Clarissa treats me like I'm invisible unless she needs something. And Camila? She just lets it happen, smiling like nothing's wrong while I fade into the background. Tonight was Helen's birthday, and I'd spent the whole day getting ready for it. I stopped by the store after work, picked out a fancy bottle of wine, red, her favorite, and a gift I thought she'd like, a silver bracelet with little charms shaped like roses, a nod to those gardens she always talked about. I even helped set up the dining room, moving chairs, laying out the tablecloth, making sure everything looked perfect. It wasn't easy after a long day, but I wanted to show I cared, that I was part of this family. Camila had been buzzing around all morning, excited about the party, and I thought maybe tonight would be different. Maybe they'd see me as more than just the guy who signed the checks. I should have known better. As I stood there on the porch, hand on the doorknob, I felt a knot in my stomach. Something was off. I could sense it before I even walked inside. Tonight wasn't going to be about celebration. It was going to be the night I finally saw the truth, the night I realized just how little I mattered in this house that was once mine. The air smelled like rain as I pushed the door open, the familiar creak of the hinges greeting me like an old friend. The house was warm, filled with the scent of roasted meat and garlic from the kitchen where Camila had been cooking. I set the wine and the gift on the hall table, shrugging off my coat. Voices drifted in from the living room, Helen's loud laugh, Clarissa's high-pitched chatter. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and told myself to get through it. I'd done it before, hadn't I? Smiled through the comments, nodded along when they acted like I wasn't there. But tonight felt heavier, like the weight of the last 6 months was pressing down on me all at once. I didn't know what was coming, not yet, but I could feel it building. This house, with its tall windows and polished floors, wasn't mine anymore, if it ever had been. And as I stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find out just how far they'd go to remind me of that. I stood by Camila's side as the guests started trickling in, the front door swinging open every few minutes with a burst of cool evening air. The living room was buzzing with chatter, the clink of glasses, and the faint hum of music. Helen had insisted on some old jazz record she said set the mood. I'd put on a clean shirt and a tie, trying to look the part of the good husband, the guy who belonged here. Camila was next to me, her arm brushing mine every now and then as she greeted people with that bright smile of hers. She looked beautiful tonight, her hair swept up, wearing a dark green dress that matched the emerald studs in her ears. I wanted to feel close to her, like we were a team hosting this party together, but every time I caught a glimpse of Helen's cold stare or Clarissa's sideways glance, that hope slipped away. They didn't want me here, not really, and it was getting harder to pretend I didn't notice. The guests were mostly Helen's friends from her social clubs, older folks with loud voices and expensive coats, plus a few neighbors who nodded at me politely but didn't linger. Then there was Clarissa, flitting around like she owned the place, her phone out as she snapped pictures for her so-called influencer career. She'd been living off Camila's generosity for months. Our generosity, I guess, since I was the one paying off her credit card every time she went overboard on clothes or trips. I didn't mind at first, she's family, and I figured she'd get her act together eventually. but the way she smirked at me tonight, like I was some kind of joke, made my jaw tighten. Helen wasn't much better. She'd been a teacher once, respected and sharp, but now she spent her days sipping tea at fancy clubs and looking at me like I was dirt on her shoe. I wasn't one of them, not born into their world of old money and big houses, and she never let me forget it. Then Philip walked in, Camilla's brother-in-law, married to her cousin who couldn't make it tonight. He was a big-shot entrepreneur, always dressed in crisp suits, his handshake firm and his grin easy. The room lit up when he arrived. Helen rushed over to hug him, Clarissa practically squealed, and even Camilla's face softened in a way it hadn't for me all night. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching them fawn over him. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. I didn't need their hugs or their praise, but seeing how they welcomed him, how they treated him like he belonged, stung in a way I couldn't shake. He was one of them, part of the family in a way I'd never be. I tried to brush it off, told myself it didn't matter, but deep down, it gnawed at me. I'd been here for years, married to Camilla, living in this house, and I still felt like an outsider. Dinner was about to start, and I followed the crowd into the dining room, the smell of food pulling me along. Camilla had outdone herself, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad with little tomatoes she'd grown herself out back. The table was set with the good plates, the ones Helen always said were too nice for everyday use. I was hungry, tired from the day, and ready to sit down and eat, maybe even enjoy myself for a minute. But as we filed in, something shifted in the air. The chatter died down, and I felt eyes on me, not friendly ones. Helen was already seated at the head of the table, sipping her wine, her lips curled in a way that made my stomach twist. Clarissa was whispering something to one of the guests, her giggle sharp and mean. Philip hung back, talking to someone, but even he seemed to sense it. Something was coming. I didn't know what yet, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This wasn't just another night of feeling out of place. This was the moment everything changed, the moment they'd push me too far. I could feel it in my bones as I stepped closer to the table, my heart thumping louder than the jazz still playing in the background. I walked into the dining room, the smell of roast chicken and warm bread hitting me as I crossed the threshold. The table was set up nice, with candles flickering in the center and the good silver gleaming under the chandelier. Everyone was moving toward their spots. Helen at the head, Clarissa plopping down next to her, Philip easing into a chair with that easy confidence of his. Camilla was still fussing with a serving dish, her back to me, and the other guests were settling in, their voices low and cheerful. I took a step forward, ready to sit down and eat after a long day, when I noticed something right away. The seats were wrong. I stopped dead, my eyes scanning the table. There were 6 chairs, 6 place settings, 6 little napkins folded just so. But there were 7 of us in the room. My seat was missing. I stood there, frozen, my hands hanging dumbly at my sides as the realization sank in. I counted again just to be sure, but it was the same. 6 chairs, 7 people, no spot for me. The chatter around the table didn't stop. No one seemed to notice I was still standing. Then Camilla turned around, carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes, and caught my eye. "Oh," she said, her voice light and sweet like she was surprised. "Isn't there the right number of seats?" She smiled as she said it, but there was something in her eyes, amusement maybe, or something colder. Before I could answer, a ripple of laughter spread around the table. Helen smirked, her wine glass halfway to her lips, like this was the funniest thing she'd seen all night. Clarissa didn't even try to hide it. She giggled loud and sharp, covering her mouth with her hand like a kid who'd pulled a prank. Even Philip, who I thought was decent, let out a quiet chuckle, his head dipping as he tried to play it off. My stomach twisted hard, like someone had punched me. This wasn't an accident. They'd planned it, set up the table to leave me out, to make me the butt of their little joke. I looked at Camilla again, waiting for her to say something, to fix it, to tell them to knock it off. She was my wife, after all, the woman I'd married, the one I'd stood by through everything. But she just stood there, holding that bowl, her smile not fading. In that moment I saw her clear as day. Not the woman I'd loved, not the one I'd built a life with, but someone else. Someone who'd let this happen, who'd maybe even helped set it up. The laughter kept going, bouncing off the walls, and I felt heat creeping up my neck, my hands clenching into fists. I wasn't hungry anymore. I wasn't tired. I was mad. Madder than I'd been in a long time. And something else, too. Hurt, maybe, or just fed up. I took a step back from the table, the wood floor creaking under my shoe. The laughter started to die down, like they'd finally noticed I wasn't playing along. I looked at each of them, Helen with her smug grin, Clarissa still smirking, Philip avoiding my eyes now, and Camilla standing there like nothing was wrong. "I guess I'm not part of the family," I said, my voice low but steady. It wasn't loud, wasn't a yell, but it cut through the room like a knife. No one said anything back. Helen's smirk slipped a little, and Clarissa's eyes widened, but Camila just stared at me, her smile gone. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked away, my footsteps heavy on the floor, heading for the stairs. The dining room went quiet behind me, the clatter of plates and voices gone. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough, felt enough. This house, these people, they'd made it clear where I stood, and it wasn't with them. As I climbed the stairs, my mind was racing, but one thing was solid: I wasn't going to let this slide. Not tonight, not ever again. The laughter stopped the moment I left the dining room, like someone had flipped a switch and killed the sound. I could feel their eyes on my back as I walked out, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see Camila's face, or Helen's smirk, or Clarissa's stupid giggle frozen in place. My shoes hit the hardwood floor hard as I made my way to the stairs, each step echoing in the big, quiet house. The air felt thick, heavy, with the smell of dinner I wouldn't be eating, and my chest was tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. I climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the banister, the wood smooth and cool under my palm. I wasn't shaking, wasn't falling apart, but something was shifting inside me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt clear, like a fog had lifted and I could finally see what was right in front of me. I got to the top of the stairs and headed for our bedroom, the one Camila and I shared, though it hadn't felt like ours in a long time. The door was half open, and I pushed it wider, stepping inside. The bed was made, the pillows fluffed, everything neat. Camila's doing, not mine. I stood there for a second, looking at it all. The dresser with her perfume bottles lined up, the closet stuffed with her clothes, the little nightstand on my side with just a lamp and a book I hadn't finished. This was supposed to be my space too, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Downstairs, they'd made that clear. They expected me to take it, to sit there quietly while they laughed, to swallow the disrespect like I always did. For months they'd been pushing me out, little by little. Helen with her comments about my job, Clarissa with her endless demands, Camila with her silence. And now this, no seat at the table, no place for me. They thought I'd just nod and go along, like some obedient dog they could kick whenever they felt like it. They were wrong. I paced the room, my mind spinning but sharp. They didn't know me, not the real me. They saw a guy who paid the bills, who came home tired and kept his mouth shut. They didn't see the part of me that got mad, that fought back when it mattered. I'd let it slide too long, told myself it was easier to keep the peace, to keep Camila happy. But tonight wasn't about peace anymore. That missing chair wasn't just a mistake. It was a message, and I'd heard it loud and clear. They wanted me gone, erased from this house, from their perfect little family picture. Fine. If that's how they wanted it, I'd show them I wasn't some pushover they could toss aside. I stopped pacing and grabbed my phone off the nightstand, my thumb hovering over the screen. I needed someone in my corner, someone who'd get it, who'd stand by me no matter what. There was only one person I could call. I scrolled to Adrian's number, my brother, my rock. He was older by 3 years, always the smarter one. The one who had my back when we were kids and Dad was yelling about something dumb. He was an attorney now, a big deal in the city, making more money than I ever would, but he wasn't the type to rub it in. He was solid, loyal. I hit the call button and held the phone to my ear, listening to it ring. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clink of dishes starting up again, like they'd moved on already, like I didn't matter. Hey. Adrian's voice came through, calm and steady, cutting through the noise in my head. What's up? I took a breath, my grip tightening on the phone. I need you here, I said, keeping it simple. Now. It's bad. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. On my way, he said, and the line went dead. I set the phone down and looked out the window, the dark garden stretching out below, the roses barely visible in the shadows. Adrian would be here soon, and then we'd see who was laughing. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I stood by the bedroom window, staring out at the dark yard, waiting for Adrian to show up. The house was quiet now, the clatter of dishes from downstairs fading into a low murmur of voices. They were probably eating, passing around the food I'd helped pay for, acting like nothing happened. My stomach growled, but I ignored it. I wasn't going back down there, not after what they'd done. The clock on the nightstand said it had been 20 minutes since I called Adrian, and I knew he'd be fast. He lived maybe 15 miles away in a sleek condo downtown, and he drove like he owned the road. I could almost picture him now, tossing on his jacket, grabbing his keys, his jaw set the way it got when he was ready to handle something big. I needed that tonight. His calm, his strength. My hands were still clenched, my mind racing with everything I'd seen at that table, but knowing he was coming settled me a little. Headlights cut through the dark first, swinging into the driveway with a flash that lit up the rose bushes. I heard the engine cut off, the car door slam, and then the sharp tap of his shoes on the porch steps. Adrian didn't mess around, he never did. I moved to the top of the stairs just as the front door swung open, and there he was, stepping into the foyer like he owned the whole damn house. He was in a tailored suit, dark gray, the kind that said money and power without trying too hard. His hair was neat, his face serious but not worried, like he'd seen worse than whatever I was about to throw at him. He looked up at me, gave a quick nod, and I felt a weight lift off my chest. "Down here," I said, my voice steady now, and he followed me as I headed toward the dining room. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but with Adrian there, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The dining room went dead silent the second we walked in. Helen was mid-sentence, her fork in the air, some story about her club friends spilling out of her mouth, when she saw us and froze, her eyes narrowed, that smug look she always wore slipping just a bit. Camila was next to her, a plate of chicken in front of her, and her face went pale like she'd seen a ghost. Clarissa stopped chewing, her mouth half open, the smirk she'd had earlier gone like it had been wiped off with a rag. Philip glanced up, confused, his eyebrows knitting together, but he didn't say anything. The other guests, Helen's buddies, shifted in their seats, looking between us like they weren't sure what was happening. Adrian didn't sit down, didn't even take off his coat. He just set his briefcase on the edge of the table with a soft thud, the sound cutting through the quiet like a gunshot. Every eye was on him now, and I stood behind him, arms crossed, letting him take the lead. This was his game now, and I trusted him to play it right. He clicked open the briefcase, pulled out a thick file, and dropped it onto the table, the papers fanning out a little. "Evening, everyone," he said, his voice smooth but hard, like steel wrapped in velvet. "Let's talk." Helen opened her mouth, probably to snap something smart, but Adrian held up a hand, and she shut it fast. He had that kind of pull. You didn't argue with him unless you were ready to lose. He flipped open the file, his fingers quick and sure, and pulled out a single sheet. "This," he said, holding it up so they could see, "is why I'm here." I didn't know what it was yet, not the details, but I could tell from the way Camila's hands gripped the table that it was bad. Adrian's eyes flicked to her, then to Helen, then Clarissa, like he was sizing them up. "You've been busy," he said, and his tone made it clear he wasn't here to play nice. He dropped the bombshell then, calm as you please, like he was reading the weather. "Camila's selling the house, and she didn't tell you." He looked at me when he said that last part, and my heart stopped for a second. "Selling the house? My house?" I stared at her, waiting for her to deny it, but she didn't. She just sat there, white as a sheet, and I knew right then Adrian had the truth, and they were screwed. I stood there behind Adrian, my arms still crossed, my eyes locked on Camila as the words hung in the air. Selling the house, my house, the one I'd poured my life into, the one I thought we'd grow old in. The dining room was so quiet you could hear the candles flickering, the little flames dancing like they were mocking me. Adrian didn't flinch, didn't even look at me again. He just kept going, his voice steady as he flipped open that file and pulled out a contract. "Let's make this quick," he said, holding it up so everyone could see the black ink and official stamps. "This is a sale agreement, signed by Camila 2 weeks ago. She's been working with a developer to turn this place into luxury condos. Already took a deposit, $500,000 wired straight to her personal account." He slapped the paper down on the table right in front of Helen, who stared at it like it might bite her. My head was spinning, but I kept my face hard, watching Camila. She wouldn't look at me, her eyes on the table, her hands twisting together in her lap. I wanted her to say something, to tell me it wasn't true, but she didn't. She just sat there, pale and small, like a kid caught stealing. Philip leaned forward, his forehead creased. "What is this?" he asked, his voice sharp, like he couldn't believe it either. Adrian didn't miss a beat. "This," he said, pointing to a highlighted line on the contract, "is evidence of deception. The deal's been in motion for months. Plans approved last month, meetings with the developer, the works. And here's the kicker, it excludes him." He jerked his thumb at me, and I felt my chest tighten. Excludes me? This was my home, my life, and she'd cut me out like I was nothing. Adrian kept going, pulling out more papers, bank records, emails, stuff I didn't even know he had. "The property's in Camila's name, sure, but under your prenup," he said, looking at me now, "she needs your consent for any major sale." She didn't get it, didn't even ask. He tossed another sheet down, this one showing the deposit, the date stamped clear as day. $500,000 already in her pocket, and the rest millions more coming once the deal closes. "The plan? Sell the house, cash out, and leave you with nothing." He paused, letting that sink in, then pointed at Clarissa and Helen. "Oh, and it gets better. The money's earmarked. Clarissa's getting a chunk to fund her influencer gigs, and Helen's set for a fancy new apartment, all while you're out on the street." I felt my hands drop to my sides, my fists clenching again. They weren't just pushing me out, they were planning to bury me. Philip's face went red, his jaw tight. "Camila, is this true?" he asked, but she didn't answer. Helen jumped in instead, her voice sharp. Now wait just a minute. This is family business, not some courtroom drama. Adrian cut her off with a look, cold and hard. Family business? Funny you say that, Helen, because you're in on it too. He slid another paper across the table. Construction plans, blueprints for condos with little balconies and shiny glass windows. These were approved last month. Camila signed off, and you knew. You've been counting on this payout to keep up your social club life. Helen's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting to Camila like she expected her to fix it. Clarissa just stared at the table, her phone forgotten in her hand, her face blank. I took a step forward, my voice low but shaking. You were going to sell our home behind my back? Camila finally looked up at me, her eyes wide, but she didn't say a word. That silence said everything. She'd done it, all of it, and she'd thought I'd never find out. Adrian tapped the file with his finger. She underestimated you, he said to me, then turned back to them. Big mistake. Because now we've got the proof. Every signature, every transaction. This isn't just betrayal, it's illegal. Prenup violation, fraud, you name it. The room felt like it was shrinking, the air heavy with their panic. Camila's face drained of color, her hands trembling now. She thought she could pull this off, that I'd stay quiet and clueless like always. But she didn't know me, not the me standing here now, with Adrian by my side and the truth laid out like a map. They were caught, and I wasn't letting go. I watched Camila's face crumble as Adrian laid out the last of the evidence, her hands shaking so bad she had to press them flat against the table. The dining room was a mess of tension, plates of half-eaten food forgotten, wine glasses sitting untouched, the air thick with the smell of chicken and fear. Adrian stood tall, his suit still crisp, flipping through those papers like he was reading a grocery list, not tearing their world apart. Helen tried to pull herself together, her voice cutting through the silence. This is ridiculous, she snapped, pushing her chair back a little, her eyes darting between me and Adrian. You can't just barge in here with some papers and accuse us of whatever this is. She waved her hand at the file, like she could make it disappear. Adrian didn't even blink. I'm not accusing, he said, calm as ever. So I'm showing you what's already done. And there's more. He reached into the briefcase again and pulled out a stack of bank statements, dropping them on the table with a soft thud. These are interesting, he said, his tone dry, almost like he was enjoying it. Helen, your social clubs, the dues, the lunches, the trips, all funded by Camila's secret account, money she siphoned off over the last year. Helen's face went stiff, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Adrian kept going, pointing at Clarissa next. And you, a $100,000 shopping spree last month. New clothes, a trip to Miami, all on a joint savings account you weren't supposed to touch. My brother's money. Clarissa's eyes went wide, her phone slipping from her hand onto the table with a clatter. Camila said it was fine, she stammered, looking at her sister like she'd save her. Camila just stared at the floor, her lips pressed tight. I felt my blood boiling, my hands clenched so hard my knuckles ached. Joint savings, that was ours, mine and Camila's, built up over years of me working late, skipping weekends, saving for a future I thought we'd share. And they'd taken it, spent it like it was nothing while I was out there busting my ass. Philip slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. You used my name for this? He barked, his voice loud enough to shake me out of my haze. He was glaring at Camila now, his face red. I saw it on those papers. My name as a reference for the developer deal. You dragged me into this mess, Clarissa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Wait, what? She said, like she was just catching up. The room was turning on itself, their perfect little family cracking right down the middle. Adrian didn't let up. He pulled out another sheet, email printouts this time. Here's the proof, he said, sliding them toward Philip. Camila listed you as a business contact, said you'd vouch for the project, forged your signature on a letter too. Philip snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it fast, and I saw his jaw tighten. This is, he muttered, throwing it down. I never agreed to this. You lied to me, Camila. All of you. He looked at Helen and Clarissa too, his disgust plain as day. Helen tried to jump in again. Philip, darling, it's not what it looks like. But he cut her off. Don't darling me, he snapped. You've been playing games with my name, my reputation. I'm done. I took a step closer to the table, my voice low but steady. You stole from me, I said, looking at Camila first, then Helen, then Clarissa. You planned to sell my home, take my money, and leave me with nothing. And you thought I'd just sit here and take it? Camila finally looked up, her eyes wet, but I didn't care. She'd lost the right to my sympathy the second she signed that deal. Adrian tapped the bank statements. It's all here, he said. Every penny they took, Every lie they told. The developer's deposit, the savings account withdrawals, enough to bury them in court if we push it. The guests, Helen's club friends, were whispering now, shifting in their seats, looking anywhere but at us. The whole room was falling apart, their smug little world crashing down around them. Clarissa started crying, big, messy sobs, but it didn't move me. Helen's face was red, her hands gripping the table like she could hold herself together. Philip stood up, shoving his chair back. "I'm out," he said, grabbing his coat from the back of the seat. "You're on your own with this." He stormed out, the front door slamming behind him. The sound echoed, and I felt something shift inside me. Relief, maybe, or just the start of something new. They'd built this perfect family on lies, on my back, and now it was done. Adrian looked at me, gave a small nod, and I knew we'd won this round. They weren't just caught, they were finished. I stood there in the dining room, the chaos settling into a heavy quiet after Philip stormed out. The front door's slam still rang in my ears. Adrian was next to me, closing his briefcase with a sharp click, his face calm, like he'd just finished a day at the office. The table was a mess, papers scattered, plates of cold food, a wine glass tipped over from when Clarissa had knocked hers in her crying fit. Helen was slumped in her chair, her hands in her lap, staring at the bank statements like they'd burn her if she touched them. Clarissa was sniffling, wiping her nose with a napkin, her mascara streaked down her face. And Camila, my wife, the woman I'd loved for years, was just sitting there, her head down, her shoulders shaking a little. I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. She'd made her choice, and now it was my turn. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the stack of papers I'd grabbed from the bedroom before Adrian got here. Divorce papers, ones I'd had sitting in a drawer for months, just in case. I'd never wanted to use them, never thought it would come to this, but after tonight, I knew it was over. I stepped forward and slid them across the table toward Camila, the sound of paper on wood loud in the silence. "This is done," I said, my voice steady, almost too calm. She looked up at me, her eyes red, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue. "You wouldn't," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was cold, final. "I already did," I said, tapping the papers with my finger. "Sign them. We're finished." Helen jumped up then, her chair scraping hard against the floor. "You can't do this," she yelled, her voice cracking. "This is her house, her family. You don't get to just walk away." Adrian stepped in before I could answer, his tone sharp. "Actually, he can," he said, pulling out another document from his stack. "The prenup's clear. Any major financial move, like selling this place, needs his signature. She broke that. Legally, the house is frozen until this gets sorted out. No sale, no money, nothing." He tossed the paper down, and Helen's face went white. She sat back down hard, like her legs gave out. Clarissa let out a wail, burying her face in her hands. "What am I supposed to do now?" She sobbed, but I didn't care. She'd spent my money like it was hers. She could figure it out. Camila picked up the divorce papers, her hands trembling as she flipped through them. "Please," she said, her voice small, looking at me like I might change my mind. "We can talk about this. I didn't mean—" I cut her off. "You didn't mean to sell our home, to steal from me, to laugh in my face?" I shook my head, stepping back. "You meant every bit of it. You just didn't think I'd fight back." She started crying then, quiet tears rolling down her cheeks, but it didn't touch me. I'd spent years trying to make her happy, trying to fit into this family, and all I got was a missing chair and a knife in my back. I was done begging for a place here. Adrian put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. "We've got everything we need," he said, low, "just for me. The house is locked down. No one's selling it until the courts figure it out. Their accounts are flagged too. Those secret ones? Gone. They can't touch a dime." I nodded, feeling a strange kind of peace settle over me. Their money, their plans, their whole fancy life. It was falling apart, and I was the one holding the hammer. Helen's club friends were already slipping out, muttering excuses as they grabbed their coats, not wanting to be part of this mess. The room felt smaller now, emptier, like the air had been sucked out with their lies. Camila's tears didn't stop, but she set the papers down, her hands flat on them, like she could hold on to something. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want it to be like this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. "You should have thought of that before," I said, turning away. Adrian picked up his briefcase, gave me a nod, and we walked out together, leaving them there in the wreckage. The front door closed behind us, the night air cool against my face, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Her life was shattered, hers, Helen's, Clarissa's, and there was nothing they could do to fix it. I'd taken back what was mine, and I wasn't looking back. I walked out of that house with Adrian, the night air hitting me like a slap, cool and sharp after the stuffy heat of the dining room. The porch steps creaked under my feet, same as always, but this time it felt different, like I was leaving something behind for good. Adrian's car was still in the driveway, sleek and black, the engine ticking as it cooled off. He didn't say much, just gave me a quick pat on the back and said, "You good?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. My chest was tight, my head buzzing with everything that had just happened, but I didn't feel lost. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was moving forward. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. "Thanks for coming." He grinned, small and quick. "Anytime, man. Let's get you out of here." We climbed into his car and he pulled out of the driveway, the Victorian mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror as we drove off. Within a month, everything changed, faster than I'd thought possible. Camila's social life fell apart first. Word got around quick. Those club friends of Helen's weren't shy about talking, and soon the whole neighborhood knew she'd tried to sell the house out from under me. People stopped calling her, stopped inviting her to their fancy dinners and garden parties. She'd always cared about what they thought, always wanted to be the perfect wife with the perfect life, and now that was gone. I heard through a buddy that she tried to explain it at some coffee meetup, but no one bought her excuses. She was alone now, stuck in that big house she couldn't sell, her name mud in the circles she'd worked so hard to impress. It didn't make me happy exactly, but it felt right, like she was finally paying for what she'd done. Helen didn't fare much better. With the secret accounts frozen and the house sale dead, her money dried up fast. She couldn't keep up with her social club dues, couldn't afford the lunches or the trips she loved showing off about. Last I heard, she'd moved into a cramped little apartment on the edge of town, one of those places with thin walls and no view. She'd gone from sipping wine in a mansion to counting pennies in a box. And I didn't feel a bit sorry for her. She'd spent years looking down on me, acting like I wasn't good enough for her precious family, and now she was the one on the outside. It was almost funny how quick her high and mighty act fell apart when the cash ran out. Clarissa hit rock bottom fastest of all. Her influencer gig was toast. Turns out you can't keep posting selfies and travel pics when your credit cards are maxed and your sister's not bailing you out anymore. She declared bankruptcy a couple of weeks after that night, her fancy clothes and trips gone in a flash. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight, deleted like she couldn't face the shame of it all crumbling. I saw her once at the grocery store, pushing a cart with cheap store-brand stuff, her hair messy and her eyes down. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, and I didn't either. She'd lived off my money, laughed in my face, and now she had nothing. That was enough for me. Philip cut ties completely, disgusted by the whole mess. He texted me a few days after, apologizing for not seeing it sooner, said he was done with them for good. I didn't blame him. He'd been used too, his name dragged into their scheme. He was a decent guy, just caught up in their web like I'd been. Meanwhile, I was doing better than I'd expected. Adrian and I rented a place together for a while, a clean, modern house a few miles away with big windows and a yard that didn't need a damn rose garden. I started a business with him, something small, consulting for startups, using my finance skills and his legal brain. It took off quick, and for the first time in years I felt free. No more walking on eggshells, no more trying to fit into a family that didn't want me. I woke up every day with a clear head, knowing I'd made it out. The divorce went through smooth. Camila signed the papers after a week of stalling, probably realizing she had no choice. I didn't take much, just my share of what was left after the courts untangled her mess. The house stayed frozen, a big, empty reminder of what they'd lost. I didn't need it anymore. I had a new home, a new life, and it was mine, built from scratch, no strings attached. I could breathe again, laugh again, and it felt good. They tried to break me, but I'd come out stronger, and that was all that mattered. I drove past the old Victorian house a year later, my truck humming along the quiet street as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and pink. It was a Saturday, and I'd been out picking up supplies for the new office Adrian and I had just leased. Nothing fancy, just a space to keep the business growing. I hadn't planned to come this way, but something pulled me here, some need to see what was left of the life I'd walked away from. The house came into view around the corner, its tall gables and wraparound porch still standing, but it didn't look the same. The paint was peeling now, flaking off in patches along the siding, and the windows were dark, no lights glowing behind the dusty glass. The rose garden out front, Camila's pride, her dad's legacy, was a tangle of weeds and thorns, the blooms long gone, choked out by neglect. It wasn't my burden anymore, and seeing it like that felt like closing a book I'd stopped reading a long time ago. I slowed down, pulling to the curb across the street, and just sat there for a minute, engine idling. The neighborhood was still upscale, manicured lawns, shiny cars, but this house stuck out now, a sore thumb in the perfect row. I wondered if Camila was still inside, rattling around in those big rooms alone. The divorce had finalized months back, and the courts had kept the property locked up. Some legal mess about the developer deal she couldn't untangle. Last I'd heard she was fighting to sell it, but no one wanted to touch it with all the liens and disputes tied to it. She'd lost everything else, her friends, her status, her family's little empire, and now the house was just a shell, a ghost of what it had been when I lived there. I didn't feel bad for her. She'd made her bed, and I wasn't the one lying in it anymore. The street was quiet, just a kid on a bike a few houses down and the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere. I leaned back in my seat, hands resting on the wheel, and let my mind drift. A year ago, I'd been standing in that dining room, no seat at the table, no place in their world. I'd felt small then, like I didn't matter, like they could erase me and move on. But they couldn't. Not really. I'd walked away, built something new, and left them to pick up the pieces. Adrian and I were doing good. Our business was steady, pulling in clients every week, enough that I'd bought this truck outright. No loan, no debt. I had a place of my own now, too. A small house with a porch and a yard. Nothing grand, but it was mine. No roses, no history I didn't choose, just a fresh start. I thought about that night, the laughter, the way they'd looked at me like I was nothing. It still stung if I let it, but it didn't control me anymore. I'd taken back what they tried to steal, my pride, my peace, and I didn't need their approval to feel whole. Helen was still in her little apartment last I checked, scraping by on whatever she could scrape together. Clarissa had moved out of state, chasing some new scheme that had probably flopped like the rest. Philip had stayed gone, true to his word, and I'd seen him once at a coffee shop, where he nodded at me like we were old friends. The family they'd built, the one they'd shut me out of, was dust now, scattered by their own greed. I didn't gloat about it, it just was. The sun sank lower, shadows stretching across the street, and I tapped my fingers on the wheel. This house, this relic of a life I'd left, didn't matter anymore. It had been a cage once, a place where I'd tried to fit, tried to belong, but I didn't need it. I didn't need their table, their chairs, their fake smiles. I'd found my own seat somewhere else, one I'd made myself, and it fit me better than anything they could have offered. I put the truck in gear, ready to pull away, and caught my reflection in the side mirror, older maybe, but steadier, sure. I smiled, just a little, and it felt real. As I drove off, the house faded behind me, swallowed up by the dusk. I didn't look back, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. That chapter was done, and I had no regrets. The road ahead was open, the air cool through the cracked window, and I turned up the radio, letting the music fill the cab. I was free, and that was enough.